Hello, everyone. We'll bring this session to an opening. It's going to be on improving municipal governance through better data sharing, a data dashboard for Kingston. The School of Policy Studies is particularly happy to host this session because it's looking at some of the more innovative and new techniques that governments are using to create a better environment for citizen engagement with improved policy and health outcomes. So it's a very important talk that you're going to be hearing today, and I'm quite pleased to be introducing it. I will leave the land acknowledgement to our speakers, and I will just go straight into an introduction. Queen's University is collaborating with the City of Kingston, Kingston Economic Development, and the Kingston Area Association of Museums, Art Galleries, and Historic Sites to create a data-driven decision-making tool that can support community planning and help measure municipal resilience to COVID-19. In some ways, this is a follow-up to the work that was done by the Working Group on Governance and COVID, and in particular, the chapter by Helen Cooper that I draw to your attention because I think it's one of the most excellent studies of municipal financial arrangements with the province and some of the problems that were laid bare during COVID. This is a follow-up because it's actually looking at how do we get around some of those problems that were made evident during COVID? How do we get better data-driven policy? So we have two speakers who are ideally placed to address this topic. They are working in collaboration with the city, as I mentioned. Our first speaker is Carolyn DeLoyde. She's a postdoctoral fellow and adjunct professor in the Department of Geography and Planning. Her current research is focused at the intersection of cities and the natural environment, natural heritage systems, ecosystem services, and community engagement. She's very engaged in her research and has a very active profile. She was a registered professional planner with 25 years of land use and environmental planning experience over a decade. So over a decade of university level teaching in geography and planning. Our second speaker is Fernando Hernandez, and he's a senior analytics developer for the Center for Advanced Computing at Queen's University. He's an agile project manager who leads software development research projects. He facilitates research support and training and provides consultation support for research-related projects. His work actually involves analyzing data and using new techniques that have become quite popular and important within government for understanding policy alternatives and new ways of doing things such as visualization, statistic modeling, some of the past practices there as well as new innovative ones, and machine learning and artificial intelligence, AI. So I'll welcome our two speakers to the front and thank you so much for being here to share your work with us. I think it's very important.
Good afternoon. We're delighted to be here today. And thank you so much for the invitation to be part of the Policy Talk series, to be here in the School of Policy Studies. To begin, let us acknowledge that Queen's is situated on the traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory. We are grateful to be able to live, learn, and play on these lands. I'm grateful to live as an uninvited guest upon the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe Nation. To acknowledge this traditional territory is to recognize its longer history, one predating the establishment of the earliest European colonies. It is also to acknowledge this territory's significance for the Indigenous peoples who lived and continue to live upon it, and whose practices and spiritualities were tied to the land and continue to develop in relationship to the territory and its other inhabitants today. It is my understanding that this territory is included in the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably peacefully share the care for and the resources around the Great Lakes. The Kingston Indigenous community continues to reflect on the area's Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee roots. There is also a significant Métis community, as well as First Nation peoples from other nations across Turtle Island present here today. So let's look at what is municipal governance. Municipal governance, for most people in the room, are probably aware what that is, but we'll just take a quick introduction, a definition of municipal governance. It's focusing specifically on how municipal councils, regional district boards, in some cases in Northern Ontario, for example, or regions in the Central Ontario, operate, how they provide services, how they make themselves accountable to the community. So when looking at municipal governance, we can look at visions and values of the community and how those are brought forward in plans, policies, initiatives that reflect those visions and values of the community. There's 4 pillars, there's actually many pillars of good governance, and I'm wanting to focus on a couple of those today. Some of those pillars include working with good values and ethics and purpose to create and provide those services to the community and to have the community grow into that vision that the citizens are looking for. Also working together, that could be amongst the municipal councils, working with Ontario government, the Canadian government perhaps, adjacent municipalities, working together with non-governmental organizations and others as we make decisions as to bring those visions and values to the forefront. Transformational leadership, also a pillar of good governance. Our leaders are able to help bring together that community, make it somewhere that people want to live, work, play, and come and be part of. And of course, informed decision-making. And that's the one that we want to focus on today. As we try to allocate those scarce resources, decide about our priorities, our visions, what we're going to do to bring forward good governance and enable our citizens to live, work, and play in a community that they want to do, let's look to informed decision-making. This is also important right now in that there, as many people are aware, there's a lot of fake news out there, alternative facts, alternative narratives. So having information at hand in order to be able to base our decisions, both individually and as a decision-making body, is of prime importance, especially in today's environment. Any talk on municipal governance would not be complete without talking about what's happening currently on the Ontario landscape. As recently as last week, the Ontario government has released proposed legislation called Better Municipal Governance Act. There's several pieces to this legislation that will make changes to the way things are organized, particularly at the regional level. This proposed legislation is looking at giving additional powers to major decision makers like the mayors in the city of Ottawa and the city of Toronto currently are enjoying some strong mayor powers, and that is being looked at for other regions as well. Regions like York, Waterloo, Peel, and several others. In fact, there'll be some facilitators that are going to be appointed by the provincial government if this legislation passes to take a look at places like Halton and other places to kind of decide on those levels of services, how services will be delivered and what those opportunities will be in the future. The other part of this legislation, which is important, is that the provincial government may be able to also appoint regional chairs in several regions across Ontario. Other parts of this legislation also include the repealing of the agriculture preserves within the Pickering area. All of this to make way for an additional 1.5 million houses over the next 10 years. So if you're interested in looking at municipal governance in more detail and looking at some of those proposed changes that are happening right now from our Ontario government, they have put out this backgrounder. This is clearly available to everyone. And if you wish to read this, it may be something you'll be quite surprised to take a look through. So Better Municipal Governance Act, proposed legislation. But let's look at the informed decision-making. Let's look at today what we're talking about. And specifically, let's look to community engagement. So when decisions are being made, we see decision makers, we can talk about municipal councils. One of the ideal proponents of good municipal governance. And as decisions are made, having information to base that decision on is always beneficial in terms of coming to the right decision. So community engagement involves people such as residents or non-governmental organizations or other members of the community who engage not just with the processes that take place at the municipal level, but also with information about the municipality to have a better understanding, to inform policy. Again, to get back to that area of where should we be putting our scarce resources? How should we be delivering those services? So we have participation opportunities that exist at the municipal level. And in particular, one is the planning process. The land use planning process in Ontario does provide an opportunity for citizens to be involved. Various public meetings can be held, other consultation activities can happen, and people can have a say and make comment with regard to the proposed decision that's going to be made. Should a development take place? Should a natural area be maintained on the landscape? There is those opportunities for people to make comment at these meetings and the decision makers to take that into account as they are making that decision. But the information that's brought by community members can always help to inform that policy and bring together facts and details that may not be available necessarily as conveniently as a public engagement tool. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at what can we do to create information to make these data-driven decisions and make information more available to citizens, to municipal councils, to other organizations across the entire community. So let's look at some tools for community engagement and how this specifically happened here in Kingston. So as I mentioned earlier, there's opportunities for citizens and stakeholders to participate in local processes, such as the planning process and many others. And so a group of people decided that the creation of an information platform would be very helpful in terms of increasing community engagement here in the city of Kingston. And that was the beginning of the Kingston Dashboard Project. The Kingston Dashboard Project is what we're going to be looking at today in some detail. And embedded within the Kingston Dashboard Project is our research survey as well to find out about community engagement. Are people involved and interested in the planning process or other municipal processes? How do they use information? How do they engage with it? Where do they find their information? Is what they're looking for available? Is it easy to understand? Will visualizations perhaps help them create that idea in their mind a little clearer so that they can then go to a public meeting or a workshop or somewhere and express their idea and show the visualization or talk about the data so that the decision can be made, based on information and based on facts. And so that's how the project was beginning to come together. The projects, those people that had been thinking of this, of course, led by Queen's University and Dr. Betsy Donald, my supervisor, who's here today. And at Queen's University, we have the Department of Geography and Planning, the Center for Advanced Computing, and the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, all collaborating and working, as well as others as well, throughout Queen's University on this project. We have the City of Kingston, as well as the Kingston Economic Development, and we have Kingston and Area Association of Museums, Art Galleries, and Historic Sites. These partners have brought many, many things to the table. They have helped us with funding, for example. We've been able to hire many research assistants and research graduate fellows in order to help us collect data and help with the development of the dashboard itself. They've lended us their expertise. They've provided sources of information. There's data architects at the City of Kingston who have collaborated with us and brought information to the group. So we have worked very collaboratively with this group. And we're hoping as the dashboard continues to evolve that perhaps we may be able to even involve additional partners as things unfold. What is the dashboard and how was it put together? The dashboard then, with this group, this collaboration, we decided to group the information on themes developed by the partners. We in fact held workshops to determine what those priority areas would be. And so we were looking at things and we've grouped them according to this list at the moment. And we've decided that things like local economy was of vital importance to help us see how Kingston and area has fared during the COVID pandemic. We're looking at employment. We're looking at community health. We're looking at mobility, the environment, housing, cultural heritage, and of course, demographics. There's a Made in Kingston twist with our dashboard, of course, that we have the addition of dissertations and theses that were created here at Queen's University according to those themes, also part of our dashboard. This provides an additional data set, methods of inquiry. It provides more information on which we can base our decisions. Sources of data, literature reviews, many very good sources of information are found within those dissertations and theses that are part of our dashboard. This is the opening page. When you look at our dashboard, you can see here that we're calling it Kingston in Focus. It's a data story of how Kingston has fared during the pandemic and what it means for building our resilient future. So we would use this information. We're hoping across the community that people will be able to use this information. It's a source of information that is credible for the city of Kingston, for the Kingston Census Metropolitan Area. We have information here that sometimes uses the catchment area of our health unit. We have information from Ontario. We have information from Canada. So it can be used across the community. It can be used to compare Kingston to the rest, to Ontario in some cases, or to compare Kingston to Canada. We can make several comparisons based on geography. This information has been gathered together in this database by the partners. And we use visualizations to help present this data. We have bar graphs, we have pie charts, we have line graphs, we have interactive maps as well. The dashboard is very dynamic. It updates daily. It refreshes itself. It has information that is current. We can see trends prior to the pandemic on the dashboard in some cases, during the pandemic, and beyond. This is a particular graph here. It comes from the mobility dashboard. This is a screenshot. This dashboard, the mobility dashboard, explores how we move around the city and the places we go. The pandemic significantly disrupted our mobility. The shift to virtual work and school meant fewer people needing to travel to their jobs or their school. Additionally, the temporary closure of many facilities and businesses resulted in a decline in traveling to activities, appointments, and recreational opportunities. As we move into a new era of living with COVID, the data captured here on this graph demonstrates how movement patterns were affected, have changed, and are undergoing adaptations to the ways we move around the places we travel. This specific graph here is ridership data. It shows the daily ridership of public transit between January 2019 and February 2022. In 2019, it illustrates the pre-pandemic norm with fluctuations, as you can see, in transit over the holidays and weekends and increases during the winter months. At the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, you can see that ridership takes a steep decline and has stayed consistently at a lower level. During the pandemic, the data shows further declines in transit use that is likely to correspond to the various waves of the pandemic. For example, in January of 2022, during the Omicron variant, there you can see a noticeable decline as well. You can see on this screenshot the community engagement survey button. It's present at the bottom of all of the dashboards. And we're hoping that the community will engage in the survey, take the survey, and we'll be able to find out some ideas from the community as to what types of additional information they'd like to see, what other indicators, what's missing from the dashboard, are they using the dashboard, how can we make improvements? Again, this is the local economy dashboard. It's an interactive dashboard. It delves into the impact of COVID-19 pandemic in the Kingston economy using indicators such as business openings and closures, business counts, hotel occupancy, outdoor patio counts. That's all found on the local economy dashboard. The impacts of COVID-19 are different for each sector, and the dashboard captures the overview and impact of local solutions, such as outdoor patios that were created to accommodate social distancing and capacity requirements for retails and food services. This particular screenshot is showing the business counts from that dashboard, and it's a graph which identifies the top 10 industries in Kingston and Ontario, so it can be compared to be further analyzed by the number of employees data within each of these sectors. The graph offers insight into the summary of business sectors and the representative percentage in Kingston and Ontario. So this is the Kingston shot, and this is in Ontario. So you can see the two of them on the dashboard, and we can compare Kingston to Ontario in this specific case. Again, you see the community engagement survey button that's present there. I'll now pass things over to Fernando.
Thank you very much. So I think Carolyn has been able to demonstrate a little bit of, well, first, what the dashboard looks like, what are a few of the visualizations that it has. But I want to take it back to how this started and what it meant for our involvement in this project. So the Center for Advanced Computing, we do a lot of things, but we have a division within it, which is called the Cognitive Development Hub. And what we do is that we specialize in software development in helping all sorts of groups. Sometimes it's research groups, sometimes it's startups, all sorts of partners. And Betsy approached us with this project initially about, this is the idea that we have, a Kingston dashboard. And, a dashboard is not a new idea, right? The idea of a dashboard exists, but this one has very interesting characteristics that I think make it unique. And it also meant that it was a unique opportunity for us to approach it in different ways. And, first step was already, let's figure out how, what are the main things or the main obstacles that we need to tackle, or the main outcomes that we need to achieve. And these, I would say, are the three main outcomes that we had to make sure that this dashboard had. Number one, self-maintaining dashboard. So Carolyn has described that it updates every day, and that is very easily said, but put in practice, it's very different. There's some technological obstacles that you need to overcome, and it's not perfect. It's still a work in progress. But I think what we have right now, it's quite cool. So I'll be talking about that in a second a little bit more, just to go into detail into how that works. The other one was the dynamic visualizations. So we don't host the data. We're pulling it from other sources. And that means that data can change. We have no control over it and what the shape is going to be. That means that the visualizations need to be able to work with it. And unfortunately, they're not humans smart enough to know what the changes have been. If there's a change in a column, in the name of the column, then if you've done something that is expecting a certain name, then it won't work. So then you need to find ways of solving that and making it as dynamic as possible. Obviously, it's not perfect and it won't be able to handle every case, but we've tried to do it as dynamic as we can. And finally, visible data sources. So once again, we're not the hosts of data. We're kind of like a hub. And the idea is that the people that look at all the visualizations and all the data, they can actually go to the original sources, validate that we haven't modified the data, and download it, play with it, and do other amazing stuff. So that was a really important component, and I'll talk about how we accomplished all of these items that we have here. So let's start with self-maintaining dashboard. This can be a daunting chart, but I'll try to go through it slowly and just talk about the important bits. So it all starts, from left to right. So it all starts at the data sources, and this was actually quite challenging, trying to figure out, okay, we know that we want to have a dashboard about local economy already. What indicators, what type of charts, what type of data we're talking about? Where does that data set come from? Who's the source, And that was a whole process. But then, we ended up finding some sources online, and some sources that unfortunately are not available online, which meant that they are static files that we had to work with. So already there we see a division. And then even then in the data sets, there's two main divisions, what I like to call data for humans and then data for computers. And those are two different sources. Sometimes we would find great information, but it was in a PDF report. And first, it means that it's static. It's only about that particular point in time. And you would find, for example, in a report, you find visualizations. Well, a computer isn't able to extract the data that generated those visualizations. So that is data for humans. And even Excel files, you might think, certainly a computer can work with those. Well, sometimes we like to make them look as reports. And once again, they fall into the category of data for humans. So it was a challenge of trying to find as much data for computers as we could find. And then, the data that was more for humans, we had to find ways of adapting it and extracting the information that we needed from it. So there is where the collection scripts come in. And what a collection script is, it's literally a piece of code that performs a particular task of pulling data from one particular data source and transforming it into a standardized format, which is how we stored all the data. So that is what a collection script is. And then that collection script, once it pulls the data, it just stores it in a database. Once again, it's important to mention, we're not hosting the data. So this database, I like to call it a cache database, meaning it is basically being replaced every day as all the data sets update, which means that, this database it's not holding historical data or anything like that. It will get updated every day. And finally, what triggers this whole thing and keeps it maintaining itself is the scheduling service. So we have configured it at the moment, to update all the data sets every day, just because based on how, how the sources are updated, they're actually not adding data, every 5 minutes or anything like that. It's not real time. So daily sounded like a good starting point. So that's what it is currently. And then it essentially triggers all the scripts, which, also pull the data and store it in the database. The other important thing here about the scheduling service is that if one of the scripts fails, then it sends an email, and we can configure who's it going to go to. And that's just a nice notification of letting us know that something's not working. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't actually update the data, which means the dashboard remains working as expected, but it won't have the newer data until the collection script is updated. So once again, there's still things to improve, but that is what the current system looks like. And then, comes the dashboard. The dashboard, it just talks to the database. The database has all the data in a standardized format that we have, and then it just makes it easier for it to work with. So now we can talk a little bit more about those dynamic visualizations that I described earlier. And I wanted just to give 2 examples of what it may look like. So here we have the businesses that closed and opened, and there's a few different categories. And we're looking right now at the difference in geography. So on the left, we have Canada. On the right, it's Kingston. The industry, it's the same. It's just like a general umbrella, business sector industries that encompasses all of them. But then you can see the options are different. For Kingston, we only have 4. For Canada, we have more. And who's to say that those categories won't change? They won't be added or removed in the future. And that means that the visualization needs to be able to handle all of that. So that's a quick, simple example where the geography changes, and that also changes the data available, which means the visualization needs to be able to adapt to it. Another example that I wanted to show is this one. So here, we're looking at this data that can be grouped in different ways. So it can be grouped by sex, and it can be grouped by age group. And that already has, for us humans, different connotation on what one is and what the other one is. But here, it's just data, and it's just a visualization. It's just a piece of code that needs to figure out what it is. And then that is also going to change the options, right? So once again, for sex, we have females, males, and that's how data comes in. But who's to say that that might not change in the future, or other options to group by may be available, as well as the age groups. Right now, there's different ranges. Those ranges can change. So once again, and even the characteristics may change. So once again, the visualizations need to be able to handle all of those situations. So that is what we meant when we talked about the dynamic visualizations. And the final technical objective that we had to work with was, making data sources visible. And the way that we accomplished it is, it works something like this. So we have a certain visualization. All of the visualizations on the bottom left have this icon that you can click on, and it allows you to see the data source. So you click on it, and it sends you to, there's a page for all the data sources, and it scrolls all the way down to whatever data source it is that you clicked on, and it shows you all the details. So you can see some metadata about the original data source. The cool thing is that we have tried as much as possible to also automate the metadata so that It is updated when we also pull the data, which is pretty cool. And for those data sources that are available online, publicly available, we have a URL which you can click on. And then, in this case, this is labor force characteristics, and it will send you to the original source, which is StatsCan. And you can see the data, you can download it, you can play with it, change, and there you go. Whatever it is that you want to do with this data. So that's how we accomplish that. Now, talking a little bit more about the team. Of course, I didn't do this on my own because that would have been really hard. And it was a really cool chance because at the CAC, we have a senior team of developers. I'm one of them. And then we have our development team is composed of interns. And that meant that we had 5 Queen students working throughout the whole project, which was really awesome. Really cool experience for them to work with an awesome group, as Betsy and Carolyn and the rest of the team, and also all the partners. So that was really, really cool experience for them. And it's really interesting. We even had one Bay Ridge High School student. So they're doing a computer science stream. And they were doing an internship with us during the summer. And so we decided to bring them into this project. Really cool. So really cool experience for the whole team that worked on this, which was really nice. And now I'll pass it back to Carolyn.
Okay, let's take a look. Let's dive right into this dashboard. We're known as KingstonInFocus.ca. So we're going to take a look now and see how this is all coming together. And we can show you how some of those charts change when we change the geography or we change the characteristics that we're looking at. Oh, yeah, I have to, yeah. Okay. So this is the actual live website. As you can see, it's KingstonInFocus.ca. So as we mentioned, it's our data story to see how Kingston fared during the pandemic and building our resilient future. You can see we have a land acknowledgement here as well. And these are all of the partners that have been working. We were grateful to MyTax, to SSHRC, to the Government of Canada, to the Kingston Area Museums, City of Kingston, Kingston Economic Development. And here's the collaboration from Queen's University that we were mentioning. So this is our main page. When you go to KingstonInFocus.ca, you'll land on this main page. These are the dashboards themes that we were talking about earlier, put together by the collaborative group. We would have working sessions that we have been doing for over a year as we would collect this data, agree what we would have here. And these pictures, for example, were taken by one of our research assistants, Sue, who happens to be here today. Many of these pictures are her own pictures. So we have created lots of these images from scratch, and in particular, some of these pictures have all been taken by members of the team. So you can decide which dashboard you would like to take a look at. We had talked about local economy, employment. There's indicators under each of these. Let's take a look at community health, for example. You can see here, this is the search for thesis and dissertations associated with each of these themes. But when we look at community health, for example, we'll go right into that dashboard. And you can see that we can change the indicators here and compare Kingston. This is the catchment area, of course, for the health unit area, that catchment area with Ontario. So we can change these different vulnerabilities on social competence, for example, and we can see how the percent that are vulnerable, this is the percent along the bottom, how our catchment area is doing with respect to the rest of Ontario. And so when we change things, you can see this is what is the median age, for example. This is what we mean by this is a dynamic dashboard. So when the researcher or the decision maker, the community member, the business owner, the future resident and existing resident is looking to find information about the City of Kingston or the catchment area based on the health unit area, or it could be the census metropolitan area or other parameters, they're different for each dashboard. You can look and make these changes to see what it is you're specifically looking for. Again, we have families living on low income. These are overall health and well-being characteristics. You can see here there's a huge range. So you can change what we're looking at to mood disorder, for example, or we could change it to diabetes. We have groupings by age. We can change it, again, we can look at changing and looking at the location and comparing Kingston and Ontario, with counts or percentages to give us a better indication of what's happening with respect to Kingston and Ontario as we're allocating those rare resources, as we're prioritizing our policy areas, as we're participating in any community engagement activities or coming forward to make presentations at municipal meetings, for example. We have opioid-related morbidity and mortality. Again, our working sessions would last for over a year as we had technical expertise from Kingston Economic Development, from City of Kingston, data architects, the team over at CAC, all working in real time. Our working sessions would be held every 2 weeks, and we would gather data, look at the validity of the data. Our partners were providing us with contacts for information. The data architects at the City of Kingston, for example, experts in that area would help us look at appropriate sources to be including here on the dashboard. So we have some static data as well, our food provider surveys. We're showing things that were happening in COVID times and pre-COVID times, making some changes. We have homelessness data. Again, one of the interesting things that this dashboard has done for our partners has been transformative, in the words of the Kingston area museums. For example, the way they collect their data, they are able to now bring their data into a collection mode that is more digital. They've moved from some paper copies or Google Sheets to actually conducting a more digital survey of their members. And that information is going to help to continue updating the dashboard, specifically with regard to cultural heritage. We have interactive maps as well. And of course, we have the community engagement survey you see at the bottom. So let's look at something here for a moment. We'll take a look at the environment map, for example. This information you would definitely find within the City of Kingston's official plan. It's the natural heritage system. But what we have here in the dashboard is we were able to overlay several schedules together so that we can give a comprehensive look. You can see the interconnectedness of what Kingston has identified for their protected areas in terms of their woodlands, wetlands, and other valued features across the landscape. So this map is interactive. You can take a look at it. We can take a look at different things. We've got the legend here. Here is an inventory. We can do this. We can take a look at parks as well, for example. So this changes in real time, comparing what you're wanting to look at. So again, this comes from the City of Kingston, and you're able to take a look at where things are located. We have planning and development as well. You can see various things. We have, in fact, even here, the official plan schedule. So you can see the land use across the City of Kingston. It's taking a moment here to load. So you can see here, again, the various uses that are on the schedule within the Kingston official plan. So this dashboard is providing a very nice repository of a variety of information and indicators, all agreed upon by the group as things that we need to be looking at as we're building back from COVID. Let's take a look at the cultural heritage dashboard, for example. This particular work was done, we had a very special research assistant, again, Sue Baisley, who's with us, whose specialty is cultural heritage, helped with the updating of this map. So we wanted to be able to show the location of GLAMs and monuments. And here is a definition of GLAMs at the top here. Art galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, collectively known as GLAMs. So this map was updated with the knowledge from our research assistant, the Kingston area museums and the city all working together, and Kingston Economic Development, to ensure that this map is accurate. So this information, again, by being part of the dashboard, we're able to improve our data collection, improve our data dissemination, improve and make accurate various parts of Kingston. And we're able to see those on the map now. So these are GLAMs. We have other indicators here too, historical monuments. The sites have all been reviewed and checked and are accurate. You can see our data sources at the bottom, the conservation heritage districts, the World Heritage Site, and various other things. You can see down here some of the COVID impacts. things that were open during COVID and not open during COVID, open to the public, the months that they were open, days open, and the economic indicators in terms of budgets for these facilities across Kingston, their charitable status. Just wanting to see one here at the bottom. Oh, here's the municipal investment, as we were speaking about earlier in the introduction, in terms of local investment in GLAMs. We have that information here. Other sources of revenue, and of course, the COVID resiliency indicators are on-site visitors and online visitors. So this is, again, a very valuable information piece to see what was available during COVID and how the city of Kingston was able to remain resilient even through those times with online opportunities. Public closures owing to COVID. So audience engagement. I did want to show you too the data sources. I'm going to show you again, for example, if we were looking at the label forest characteristics, as this was the chart that Fernando was showing earlier. If you you make these changes, as Fernando was mentioning, you could change this in real time by age group, and you see the chart just changes right in front of you. You can then go to the data source directly, and this page gives all of the information. It's like a data directory, really, so that people can see exactly where did that information came from, when was it last retrieved, and you can see our update was this morning at 6 o'clock. And you can then make determinations of if you wish to see that data directly. You simply, as Fernando had mentioned, you could click on the details and it takes you to that Stats Canada site, but it takes you to exactly that data, not just the Stats Canada website, but the actual, this is the data that you have seen visualized. So the expertise at CAC was able to take all of this data and make those interactive visualizations. That's making our Made in Kingston dashboard have that unique twist. So those are the main things that we were wanting to show you today with respect to the dashboard. And we want to thank everyone, our partners who have been involved with the creation of the data dashboard. As we mentioned, Geography and Planning, Center for Advanced Computing, the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, Kingston Economic Development, City of Kingston, Kingston and Area Museums, Association of Museums, Art Galleries and Historic Sites, the generous funding of MyTax. As we mentioned, we had several computer students funded by MyTax with the generous contributions of Kingston Economic Development and Kingston Area Association of Museums, Art Galleries and Historic Sites. Also, the SHRC funding, Government of Canada has provided, as you can see, research funding for this project. So we would like to thank you today for coming and listening to our Kingston Data Dashboard story, and we look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think that was a really interesting talk. I know I have a lot of questions, but we're now going to open it up to you for questions. And I'm going to ask that people in the room just put up their hands, and then I will be monitoring the questions that come in online and try to be fair with both groups. So I see a hand up over there, so we'll turn to you. And if you could just begin by stating your name and then asking your question. Oh, no.
Thank you very much for painting a very nice, elegant dashboard. But I'm interested in that landscape is the valleys and the hills and the erosions. And what kind of challenges and issues of the local governance dealing with rural living, the senior and long-term homes for seniors, and also affordable housing for young couples, young families, because there's an increase in rise of homelessness. And so how does that fit into your data analysis in that equation in dealing with these issues?
Thank you. So that question covers a lot of ground. And Carolyn, would you like to?
Thank you for your question. Yes, again, we only have 10 minutes, so I wouldn't be able to answer all of that in 10 minutes. That would be a talk on its own, I'm sure. This information tool hopefully will help inform debate around those very issues that you're discussing. Based on data, based on homelessness data, we do have that on our dashboard provided by the City of Kingston, and interpretation of that data and explanation of that data by City of Kingston personnel who are experts in that area. But our dashboard provides that repository so that people can see that and see the different characteristics, for example, of the homeless population within Kingston. There's Indigenous persons, for example, the homelessness data can be looked at in terms of various characteristics. So again, we're providing information, not really solutions per se to those various challenges that you're speaking of, but our data dashboard is attempting to bring information to the forefront. Perhaps you'd like to answer that community survey that we have in the bottom with some of your ideas for new indicators and some of your comments so that we can take that into consideration as we work forward in the next iteration of the dashboard.
Question is, how reliable is the data to make the changes to the dashboard?
Yes, our data is, as you can see, the data sources come from reliable sources, such as the City of Kingston themselves, or Stats Canada, or the Ontario government, which are credible sources. And so again, if you wanted to, I see you're shaking your head. So if you wanted to maybe answer that community survey and put some of those thoughts in the tech, we have an opportunity for you to add your thoughts in the survey. I'd like to know. And I would like you to, we could take a closer analysis when we have a bit more time to analyze some of those concerns you've raised. So thank you.
And people just laughed in the room because he said, does he have to put his name on it? And you don't have to. So I'll turn it over to Helen Cooper, had her hand up, then we'll go there.
Helen Cooper. My question is quite straightforward. Do your population statistics include Queen's undergraduate population or not? And what percentage of the Kingston area population are in essence transitory undergraduate students at Queen's, St. Lawrence, and RMC? My understanding is it's a huge percentage of the population. And how do you take that into account?
Thank you for that question. Yes, since the data comes from Census Canada, a lot of times the undergraduate population may not be included in the census data. So your rates. Mm-hmm. We can take a look here. Yeah, no.
Sorry, so the data is included in a secondary panel that addresses secondary students.
That's correct. It's not in the same graph as the census population data, but yeah, you're quite right. And that does have major influence in terms of the population of the Kingston area.
And of course, there were no students didn't come to Kingston for years, and they are significant users of the transit system. So you have an automatic skewing of your data then, right? Because most communities, people didn't leave town. It's really an issue in Kingston to try to decide how to incorporate that population.
And for people online, the comment was just that if you even look at the ridership data, it would have been skewed by the absence of students during COVID at that point. So you really do need to factor this in the case with a community like Kingston. Okay, I'll turn it over to the next question. And please bear in mind that we are recording this and people online cannot hear it if you don't have the mic. So follow-ups are not, I'll either have to repeat them, but I'll ask you to minimize them.
Hi there. My name is Claudia, and I'm a PhD candidate here as well. I was actually wondering about data with regards to other animals. So other animals are part of our communities as well, and their movements and mobility shifted with regards to COVID too, right? We saw an uptick in certain kinds of animals moving around the city. There's lots of data on different animals in our societies beyond just, trees and sewage catchments, but actual other populations of animals that exist in our cities, dogs, cats, raccoons, squirrels. Does this kind of information, is it included in the data that we have on Kingston? Because I think it will help us to understand and get a more complex understanding of the city.
Great, thank you for that. And I'll include coyotes and foxes as well.
Thank you, Claudia. An excellent question. And I would love to meet with you after the session. Perhaps you have information in this regard that we could add to the dashboard. That would be definitely something that could be incorporated into the next iteration of the dashboard. We are planning on adding more indicators and more things on the dashboard. It is a work in progress. So ideas like yours are most welcome. So please answer the survey or let's meet online or offline. And I would love to hear more about some of the data perhaps that you may have. I know you have some specialty work in that area. So I would love to consider that and bring it to the partners and see if we can incorporate, as you say, a more expanded view of environment. Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go over here next, and then we will go over there as well.
Thank you. My name is Layli, and I'm just wondering how you plan to advertise this to get more community engagement, get the business owners involved, and the people who are making the policy changes looking at the data.
So I'll turn it over to you, Carolyn. And also Queen's students using the data.
Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, we would love to advertise the dashboard, to have more users of the dashboard. Absolutely. So we are looking at perhaps having an event where we can make it known to the wider community that the dashboard does exist. And at that time, we could perhaps have some additional coverage in terms of bringing members of the community together, making this available so that just as you say, business owners, future residents of Kingston, existing residents of Kingston, academics and others could all use this data. So really excellent point. And where we are hoping that in the new year, perhaps that we'll be able to have an event, a community event where we can bring the data dashboard to the attention of the community. So thank you.
Okay, and we have another question over here.
Thanks. I'm Nico Koenig from Planner School. I guess I'm the only planner here. Great work. Great to see this. Two questions. One is just like in terms of its next step. Some of the data is geolocated, so kind of easy to see, like the patio permits that comes from Dash. That's from City of Kingston. Really interesting to see that mapped out. But some of the other data is not geolocated or could be. I was wondering if it seems like a next step, like in terms of a story to communicate this is like, kind of like a walk score potentially, where you have your information of data and like people's available access to museums, for example, or close to parks, for example. So you can kind of see how certain neighborhoods are more accessible or inaccessible to some of these different lenses. So that was my first question. And then secondly, I was just curious where this related to the mobility data that comes from Google Mobility. And it seems like that is ending. And it's a really interesting subsect. And I'll just tell you, I was speaking with the Downtown BIA executive director this morning, and we're trying to figure out how many people come, how people travel for, retail to the downtown area. But this data is kind of Frontenac, is from my understanding. So I was just curious if you had any details about where that data set comes from, or if it's continuing.
Okay, we'll have a member of the audience answer that.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Betsy Donald, so I'm involved in the project, and I just wanted to answer Helen's comment about the ridership data, just to be clear. So it is coming from Google Analytics. So it is actually tracking anyone who used their cell phone to get on the bus. So it doesn't matter if you were a student or not. So it actually does, in that particular data set, it does capture the students. But I agree with you, what's so notable about that data set is that you see the dive. Then you saw Queens, of course, during COVID, make a decision, the undergrads, that students would no longer pay for the bus. I don't know if they're no longer paying for the bus as a collective, but that's a policy issue that I think is interesting. And then I just wanted to say that, yes, the Google Analytics data, we keep asking them past February 2022, because we want to monitor that to see if it's gone up, which I'm hoping it has since then. And then we also have a lot of housing data to answer the question. It's not just how homelessness, but also rents, and you can track and see the growth of how expensive Kingston is getting. I could go on, sorry, I'm so enthusiastic.
And I'm going to turn it to our speakers to see if you have a last comment for about 30 seconds each, just on some of the challenges you faced in your response to the question.
Yeah, for sure. I think I appreciate some of the questions being about the interpretation, and I think that was one of the goals too that we had made it very clear is if the dashboard is going to keep going, you might see right now a trend, but the idea is that this is a self-maintaining dashboard. You don't know how those trends are going to change. In that description, that block of text that is static and put there forever, it should be able to accommodate for those changes. So therefore, we have left interpretation out of it as much as possible, made it as neutral as possible. And actually, we want the people looking at the charts, people analyzing the data to be the ones making those interpretations. And then what is the discourse that comes from it, right? And proceeds. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, again, I wanted to thank everyone for their thoughtful comments and for coming today. And I am looking forward to reviewing any input that you may have from the community engagement survey. And thank you for the comments today. We're looking forward to bringing in some more information and more indicators as we move to have our dashboard evolve over time and in the coming months. So thank you again for coming today.
So we're going to have to finish now. I think we could go on for quite a bit more time with questions about this and talking about the data. But one of the things I would really encourage you to do is to go and take the survey, to use the data to provide some feedback, because obviously our speakers are very open to it, as well as Betsy, and they do want to hear these comments and understand how to improve it, make it more useful so it'll get even more traction going and be replicated in other cities. So I'd like to thank Carolyn and Fernando. I think you guys did a great job. So what I will say is, miigwech, merci, thank you. And thank you to our online viewers for being here as well.